Corporate events blur together after a while. Same beige carpeting, same lanyards, same clinks of wine glasses trying to sound like success. I never enjoyed them, but I knew how to blend in. Smile, shake hands, ask the right questions about quarterly projections while trying to avoid the mini-quiches. That Thursday evening in Seattle was no different, at least it wasn't supposed to be. I arrived early, as always. I liked to sit in the middle of the room, a row or two from the back. Out of the spotlight, but close enough to read body language. A few colleagues nodded my way as I took my seat. Some light chatter passed around me, the kind that dies the moment the keynote speaker taps the mic. I checked my watch. Amber was supposed to be here already. She wasn't one to miss these events, especially not now that she'd been promoted. Not now that she was under him. Her new boss, Trevor Marlin. I'd only met him twice before, once at a holiday mixer where he got just drunk enough to let you see the arrogance behind the charm, and once in a Zoom call where he referred to himself in the third person more than once. Amber, on the other hand, always spoke highly of him. Ambitious, she said. Drives results. I remember her saying that like she wasn't just describing him professionally, like she admired something more than his performance reviews. Still, I didn't think anything of it then. But that changed when the side hallway door opened. It was subtle at first, a soft click behind me. I turned slightly in my seat, expecting maybe a staff member or late vendor. Instead, I saw her, Amber, my wife, and Trevor. They stepped out side by side. His hand was tugging at his tie like it had just been yanked the wrong way. She was looking at the blank black screen of a powered-off panel, using it as a makeshift mirror. Her lipstick was already on. She wasn't applying it, just smoothing the edges with the pad of her finger, like she'd wiped her mouth earlier and was redoing it for presentation. Neither of them looked around. They didn't whisper. They didn't smile. They just looked composed, adjusted, prepared, rehearsed. I don't know why, but I didn't move. I just watched. Amber broke off and walked toward a seat near the back, passing 2 rows behind me. I didn't turn to follow her with my eyes. I didn't want to make a scene. Trevor went up front, where the rest of the C-levels were waiting. A few nods, a clap on the back. Nobody seemed surprised he arrived from a different entrance. That, more than anything, told me this wasn't the first time. The lights dimmed. Trevor approached the podium with the practiced ease of a man who had said these words 100 times and never meant any of them. "Welcome, everyone," he began, smiling as if he owned the building. "Great turnout tonight. Big ideas, big changes, and hopefully big takeaways." He let the room breathe, scanning the crowd like a stand-up comedian warming the stage. Then he added, too casually but just loud enough, "Some of us even brought a +1. He let the pause hang. "Even if not everybody knows that yet." Laughter. Not loud, not wild. Just enough to ripple through the room, as if people wanted to laugh but weren't entirely sure what they were laughing at. The kind of laugh you give a man with power, even when his joke makes you squirm. I didn't laugh. I stared at the back of his head, then down at the floor. My ears rang. I felt this wave, cold, sharp, spread through my chest, like my heartbeat had just dropped into my stomach and shattered. I glanced toward where Amber was sitting. She didn't turn around, didn't shift. Her body stayed poised, perfectly still, like she hadn't heard anything worth reacting to. But a second later, my phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. It was her. A text. "You're misunderstanding everything." We were just reviewing the presentation script, winking face with tongue. The winking emoji stopped me cold. That wasn't reassurance. That wasn't "I love you." That was a smirk. A deflection wrapped in glitter. A message not to calm me down, but to mock my reaction. I stared at the screen. Read the message again. "You're misunderstanding everything." Not, "There's nothing going on." Not, "It's not what it looks like." Not even, "I'm sorry if that came off weird." Just, "You're misunderstanding." Like it was my fault. Like I was the one reading the room wrong. Like I was paranoid. But she knew me better than that. She knew I didn't jump to conclusions. I studied them. I studied people. Amber had seen me call out bad deals and boardroom lies without raising my voice. She'd watched me connect dots no one else thought were there, until they were. She knew exactly how I processed suspicion. So if she sent that text, she wasn't trying to get ahead of my reaction. She was testing it. My thumbs hovered over the screen. I thought about replying with a question. Why were you in that hallway with him? Why did he make that joke? Why did you text that instead of just being honest? But I didn't send anything. The next few minutes of the presentation passed like they were underwater. I didn't hear a word. My mind was on that moment. Her smoothing her lipstick in the reflection, Trevor adjusting his tie, the perfectly timed entrance. The way she didn't look for me, didn't wave, didn't even acknowledge we were in the same room. We were colleagues now, apparently. Strangers sitting on opposite sides of a sinking ship. The event dragged on. New speakers. Product demo. A projection about Q2 numbers that made less and less sense as the slide deck dragged past the 40-minute mark. None of it mattered. I kept one eye on the back of the room, the other on my phone. Nothing from her. Not even a glance. After the lights came back on and the applause faded, people started trickling toward the catering tables and open bar. Amber was still talking with someone from HR when I stood up to leave. I didn't approach her. I didn't even make eye contact. I just walked past, headed toward the elevator. And still, my phone stayed silent. No follow-up. No let's talk. No, that came out wrong. Just the emoji. On the ride down, I stared at my reflection in the elevator mirror. Not angry. Not yet. Just recalculating. The way you do when you realize the map you've been using no longer matches the terrain. When the person sitting across from you at dinner, sleeping beside you at night, holding your hand in public, might not be who you thought she was anymore. And the worst part? Somewhere deep down, I think I already knew. After that night in Seattle, everything that didn't make sense before suddenly did. It was like the lights had flipped on in a room I thought I knew. I could see the outlines of things I hadn't noticed before, movements, gaps, details that never stood out until I looked at them all at once. Amber changed that night. Or maybe, more honestly, I changed. I stopped brushing things off. I stopped making excuses for her. I started watching. It didn't take much to notice what was already there. A few weeks before that trip, she'd swapped her wardrobe. Gone were the neutral cardigans. The work blouses she used to joke made her look too HR. Suddenly it was silk open backs, deep cuts, designer labels. At first, I thought it was part of her promotion. A dress for the job you want kind of thing. But then came the heels, 4 inches high, not the flats she used to swear by for long office days. The perfume, too. Something sharper, spicier, unfamiliar. I asked her about it once. She laughed and said, "It's Tom Ford. Lost Cherry. You don't like it?" I didn't answer. I didn't know how to tell her that it smelled like someone trying to be someone else. Her schedule shifted next. She started leaving earlier than me. And I'm an early riser. I used to be the first one up, out the door before traffic. But now, I'd wake to a cold side of the bed and the faint sound of her key locking the door behind her. When I asked about it, she said, "I've got morning stand-ups now. New boss, new pace." Then kissed my cheek and changed the subject. Always changing the subject. The late nights became frequent. Just a few hours to finish the audit. Client dinner ran long. Trevor needed input on the roadmap. That name, Trevor, slipped more and more into her mouth like a placeholder for every reason she wasn't home. I noticed something else, too. Her energy changed. Amber used to come home drained. She'd kick off her shoes, pull her hair down, sigh like she'd just wrestled the day into submission. But now she came back with this glow. Subtle. Like something inside her had been lit, and she was trying to dim it down before walking through the door. And her phone? Forget it. That was sacred ground now. She used to leave it on the kitchen counter when she showered. Now it followed her everywhere. If she wasn't holding it, it was face down. And locked. Always locked. She even added biometric lock to her laptop, her work laptop, which I had never once touched before and suddenly became more protected than a bank vault. I don't know when I first said it to myself. Maybe it was after I caught her texting in the bathroom with the fan running. Or when I saw the name T flash on her lock screen at 11:13 p.m., followed by her hurrying to delete the preview. I pretended I didn't see. But I did. I always did. I didn't confront her. I didn't storm in with accusations. That's not me. I'm not interested in rage for the sake of it. I wanted the truth. But I also wanted her to hand it to me. Voluntarily. Honestly. She never did. Instead, she gave me breadcrumbs. Like the weekends. She started visiting her sister every other Saturday. Same story each time. She's been having a hard time. I think she needs someone to talk to. Never mind the fact that she and her sister hadn't been close for years. When I texted her sister one weekend to ask if she was doing okay, she replied, "Yeah, totally fine. Why?" I didn't respond. Amber would return hours later, sometimes close to midnight. Once, after one of those supposed visits, she left her scarf in the passenger seat of her car. I brought it in for her and caught a faint whiff. Cologne. Not mine. And when she came home, she always looked freshly showered. Hair damp. Face clean. Like she'd scrubbed the day off. That became a pattern. Leave. Return late. Shower. Silence. I didn't know if it was guilt or calculation. Maybe both. But I stopped asking. Every question I asked was deflected or parried with a new subject. Work's been crazy. You've been quiet lately? Can we not do this right now? So I stopped trying to pull the truth from her hands. Instead, I started collecting it on my own. It began simply. Photos of her parked in unfamiliar places, calendar checks. Screensh *TS of vague texts. An app to track our shared credit card. Where I noticed she was buying drinks at bars I didn't even recognize. One of them, a rooftop lounge known for being discreet. I never said a word. Every new inconsistency went into a folder. Literally. I named it Amber Notes, hidden inside another folder named Client Reports Q1. I wasn't trying to build a case. At least not at first. I just needed to know I wasn't crazy. Turns out I wasn't. The final thread came the week after the Seattle trip. She said she was working late again. I stayed up reading in bed. Not really reading. When I heard the front door open past 11, I stayed still, pretending to be asleep. She paused by the doorway longer than usual. I felt her watching me. Then I heard her sigh, long and slow, and walk to the bathroom. Water ran. Drawers opened. Her footsteps were careful, like she didn't want to wake me, or like she didn't want to see what she looked like in my eyes right then. I opened my own eyes after she slipped into bed. I lay there staring at the ceiling. She didn't touch me, didn't say anything. The silence was worse than any confession. And here's the part one didn't expect. I wasn't angry. I wasn't broken. I was just separate. Like whatever thread had tied us together had thinned to the point where I could no longer feel it. This wasn't just about Trevor. It wasn't about one hallway, one late night, or one lie. It was about all of it. The accumulation, the erosion, the 1,000 tiny betrayals that were too small to call out alone but impossible to ignore together. And maybe the worst part? She didn't even try to lie well. Because real lies require effort. What she was doing wasn't lying anymore. It was indifference. And that realization hurt more than anything else. So I waited. I listened. I documented. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. It happened on a Thursday. Not that the day mattered. But I remember it because it was cold, gray, and forgettable. The kind of day no one marks. The kind of day I used to think nothing life-altering could happen on. But apparently, betrayal doesn't care about calendars. Amber texted me around 4:40 p.m. Said she'd be at the office late. Trevor's got us running through revisions before tomorrow's client deck. It was routine by then. She'd crafted a dozen of these sentences before. Probably had them saved in notes as templates. Add a verb. Drop a name. Hit send. I replied, "Okay. See you later." She didn't answer. I left work an hour early without telling anyone and drove across town to the glass-tied campus. The building was sleek, glass walls, rooftop access, executive garage tucked behind a badge-gated entrance. I parked 2 blocks away, parallel to a bakery that had closed for the day, and waited in my car. I didn't know what I was expecting. I didn't even know what I wanted. I just needed to see it. With my own eyes. Unfiltered. Undeniable. The sun dipped low behind the skyline. A red-orange streak settled along the edge of the buildings. Cars came and went. Employees trickled out in twos and threes, laughing, calling Ubers, complaining about project deadlines. And then there she was, Amber. She exited through a side door. Not the front where most people walked out, but a side entrance I hadn't noticed until it opened. She stepped out slowly, adjusting her coat. A few seconds later, Trevor followed. They weren't holding hands. They weren't touching. But they didn't need to be. The space between them said enough. It was familiar, comfortable, not flirty, worse, relaxed. Like this was their rhythm. Like they'd done this before. They walked in sync toward the garage. Her pace matched his. She said something. I couldn't hear it, but I saw her laugh. Not big, just a soft, amused smirk that she only gave when she was at ease. They stopped near her car. She turned slightly, leaned in. No words now, just stillness. Then came the hug. It wasn't fast. It wasn't the polite, good job, boss kind of hug you give after a pitch. It was long, familiar. Her hands rested lightly on his back. His chin tilted toward her temple. And then, her head leaned in, just a little, just enough to rest briefly against his shoulder. Like she was exhaling. Like he was home. My knuckles whitened around the steering wheel. But I didn't move. I didn't storm out. I didn't take a photo. I didn't need to. I already had the evidence, I just didn't want to accept it until now. Eventually, Trevor pulled away first. He walked off, not turning back. Amber stood there a moment longer, then unlocked her car and climbed in. She didn't look around, didn't check her phone. She just sat still for a few seconds before starting the engine. I didn't follow her home. I didn't drive away either. I sat in the dark, watching her tail lights disappear, and felt hollow, not shattered, just emptied out. Like whatever part of me still hoped this wasn't real had finally been scraped clean. The drive home was silent. I didn't turn on music. I didn't check the radio. The noise in my head was enough. When I got back, the house was quiet. Lights off. Amber's coat wasn't on the rack yet. I walked to the office and opened the drawer where I'd hidden the folder. Inside, printed screensh *TS, card transaction logs, time-stamped calendar cross-references, 2 photos I'd taken of her car parked blocks away from her sister's. None of it explosive, but together it told the story. One she hadn't bothered to edit. I laid the folder on her desk in the den, right where she'd see it when she walked in. I didn't wait up for her. I didn't want to see her reaction. I just went to bed and stared at the ceiling, arms folded over my chest, like that could hold something in place. I heard her come in around 11:20. Her heels clicked lightly, hesitantly. Pause by the entry. Then the soft shuffle of her steps moving toward the office. 10 minutes passed. Then the door creaked open. She stood in the doorway, folder in hand. Not panicked. Not apologetic. Just tired. Her face was unreadable. She stepped inside and sat on the edge of the bed, folder still resting on her lap. She didn't open it again. She just ran her fingers along the edge. Finally, she spoke. Quiet. Measured. Things aren't as simple as they look. I didn't respond. She looked at me, waiting, like she expected a question. A demand. An explosion. But I had none left to give. David, she said softly. Please don't jump to. You didn't deny it. That shut her up. I turned to look at her. And for the first time in weeks, I really looked. Not at her clothes. Not her phone habits. Not her schedule. Her. The person I had loved. The person I had married. And I saw a stranger sitting at the edge of the bed like it was a bench at a terminal. Ready to leave. Already gone. She opened her mouth. Closed it. Set the folder aside and stood. You've been keeping track, she said, nodding once. I waited. I guess that's fair. I raised an eyebrow. Fair. She didn't flinch. You needed answers. You found them. And that was it. No apology. No panic. No begging. Just resignation. like she wasn't surprised, like she'd already had this conversation in her head and played out every version of it. Except the one where she actually said sorry. I wanted to ask her why. Not just why Trevor or why the lies, but why us? Why take what we'd built? Quiet, stable, years of shared history, and trade it for this? Flicker, but the question lodged in my throat. Because deep down, I already knew she wouldn't answer it. Or worse, she would, and I wouldn't like what I heard. She turned to leave the room. I spoke before I realized I was going to. Was it just him? She stopped. A long silence. Then, no. That one word cracked something. She didn't elaborate, didn't turn around. She just left the room, her footsteps softer than they'd ever been. Like she knew something had changed between us in that moment, and whatever came next wouldn't involve pretending anymore. I sat there for a long time, staring at the door, my breath shallow. The betrayal wasn't a moment. It wasn't one hug in a parking lot. It was a pattern, a rhythm, a muscle memory. And now I had confirmation. Not the kind that made it easier, just the kind that made it real. The morning after our non-confrontation, the house was quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't come from peace, but from absence. Amber had already left early as usual. But this time she didn't leave a note. No text. No, heading out, let's talk later. Nothing. And maybe that said more than anything else. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee cold in my hands, staring at the folder I had retrieved from her desk. I had given her a chance to say something. Anything. But she didn't. Not even a lie. Just that vague line. Things aren't as simple as they look. As if ambiguity could soften betrayal. But the simplicity of it was the point. The walk. The hug. The tired, intentional lies. It was as simple as it looked. She'd chosen someone else, maybe more than one someone else, and no amount of complex justification would erase what I'd seen with my own eyes. So I started looking backward. Trevor Marlin. The name rolled around in my head like a loose screw. He was charming in that curated executive way, tall, sharp smile, always 2 words away from a TED Talk. When he joined Glasstide, the company made a lot of noise about innovation, agility, rebranding. Amber called him disruptive, in a tone that sounded way too admiring. But something about him never sat right with me. The performance of it all. The manufactured charisma. The easy way people seemed to orbit him until they quietly disappeared. I remembered something Amber had said last year, maybe in passing. She's gone now, she had said, scrolling through an email on her phone. Who? I asked. Kate. She used to lead brand strategy. The one with the tattoos. I vaguely remembered the name. Amber had talked about Kate once or twice. Said she was sharp, driven. A little blunt, maybe, but talented. Then nothing. She got fired? I asked. Amber paused. Sort of, she said. Internal conflict. Apparently, she didn't mesh with Trevor's vision. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Office politics, restructuring, that kind of thing. But now, with everything stripped down to its bones, I started wondering, how many others didn't mesh? I pulled up LinkedIn, searched Kate plus Glasstide. A few profiles came up, but one caught my eye. Kate Hillman, former director of brand strategy. Her location was still local. Her bio was short, professional. But there was a quote in her headline. Say it plain, and let the silence do the heavy lifting. I don't know why that hit me. Maybe because I'd been living in so much silence lately. I messaged her. Hi Kate. This might sound strange. My name is David Chin. I think my wife used to work with you at Glasstide. I know this is out of the blue, but I'd really appreciate a few minutes of your time. This is important. I didn't expect a reply, but 20 minutes later I got one. David, I know who you are. I have time today if you're serious. But if you're looking for a there, I'm not that person. We agreed to meet at a small coffee shop near Pioneer Square. Off the grid, quiet, with a view of the rain streaking down the windows like watercolor. Kate was already there when I arrived. Hoodie under a long coat, dark jeans, no makeup. Her expression was calm, but alert, like she'd been waiting to be asked the questions I was about to ask. David, she said, offering a curt nod. Appreciate the directness. Most spouses don't come forward until after everything explodes. I sat down. I think the explosion already happened. I'm just walking through the smoke. She cracked a small, sad smile. I know that stage. We didn't do pleasantries. No small talk. I just told her everything. What I saw, what I'd suspected. The confirmation Amber hadn't bothered to deny. I kept it clean, factual, not emotional. The more I talked, the more still she became. When I finished, Kate reached into her bag and pulled out a worn, navy blue notebook. A real one. Spiral-bound, bent cover, pages thick with ink and memory. She slid it across the table. I started logging names 2 years ago, she said. At first, I thought it was just odd turnover. Smart, capable women suddenly sidelined. Some transferred. Some resigned mid-project. Some, like me, were given HR-friendly pink slips with a smile and a severance. I opened the notebook. 9 names, dates, job titles, department notes. In the margins, brief annotations. VP design, promoted then cut loose. Exec assistant, relationship suspected, gone in 6 months. Marketing strategist, saw them together, disappeared after Q3. I ran my finger down the list. I didn't recognize all the names, but one stood out. Amberchin. Next to her name, nothing. Just the date she transferred under Trevor's department. I looked up at Kate. You wrote her name. She was the first one I wasn't sure about, Kate said. Didn't want to assume, but I saw enough. Late meetings, whispered huddles. She changed. You can tell when someone's orbiting the sun too close. The phrase landed hard. I closed the notebook. Why are you showing me this? Kate took a breath. Because no one ever asks. Because I spent months thinking I imagined it. HR told me it was my attitude. My lack of collaborative spirit. But I saw it happen. Over and over. Women brought close, elevated, and when they got too real, too complicated, they vanished. Most people just moved on. You didn't. She shrugged. I was angry, so I documented. Not because I thought anyone would care, but because I needed to remind myself I wasn't crazy. I understood that more than I could say. I don't want revenge, she said. But I also don't want him doing this again. She looked at me squarely. Your wife isn't the first. She won't be the last. There was no bitterness in her tone. Just clarity. Like she'd said it too many times to still feel the sting. I nodded slowly. What happened to you wasn't fair. No, but it's done. My question is, what are you going to do with what you know? I didn't answer. Not then. I just sat there, watching the rain blur the skyline. When I finally stood to leave, I shook her hand. Firm. Respectful. Thank you, I said. She held my gaze. Don't just let it die quietly. That's what they count on. I walked back to my car with the notebook in my bag and a knot in my chest. I had come looking for a piece of Amber's truth. What I found was a pattern. Bigger than her. Bigger than me. This wasn't just infidelity. It was a system, and it was still running. I didn't sleep that night. Not out of grief. Not even anger. I was past both by then. This was something colder, clearer. The kind of clarity that comes after you've seen behind the curtain. When the illusions drop and what's left isn't heartbreak, but a list. A sequence. Steps to be followed. Amber hadn't just betrayed me. Trevor hadn't just manipulated her. What I was looking at now was an ecosystem of silence. One that had allowed someone like him to build a career off of charisma and turnover. People came and went and no one asked why. And the ones who did, they disappeared too. I didn't want payback. I wasn't interested in ruining lives for sport. But I couldn't let it slide. Not after what I saw in Kate's notebook. Not after realizing Amber was part of a pattern that no one seemed willing to interrupt. So I started gathering. It was easy, really. The pieces were already there. Amber's phone habits. Her calendar. Her expense reports. The company chat logs I'd seen once over her shoulder. I remembered dates, phrases, times she said she was too tired, to talk, but still managed to laugh in the next room during late-night texts. I already had photos from the parking garage, the hug, the timestamps. I spent the weekend compiling it all, quietly, carefully. No confrontation, no threats, just facts. A few key things I included. *TS of Amber's corporate calendar entries labeled Strategic Alignment with Trevor. Repeating twice a week, off hours. Hotel receipts billed to the glass-tied corporate card for 2. During dates she claimed to be with her sister. A recording subtle, from my phone, left running in my coat pocket one night, of her whispering, "Let me talk to him first," followed by a male voice saying, "He doesn't have to know." Parking garage footage from the night of the hug. Not just a still photo, video. The long exhale. The hand on the back. The pause before separating. A Slack thread, forwarded anonymously by a friendly engineer I'd once helped with a resume, between Trevor and another employee, heavily flirtatious, dated weeks before Amber even joined his team. And most importantly, Kate's notebook. I digitized the whole thing, each page scanned, names redacted except for those I could confirm were no longer with the company. I knew better than to submit someone's story without their permission, but I also knew what patterns looked like. The final piece was an old email Amber had left open on our shared tablet a few months ago. An internal HR memo about maintaining optics during cross-team promotions. It didn't say anything outright, but the language was cautious, like they were aware of how things looked, even if they pretended not to be. By Sunday night, I had zipped everything into a folder. I called it Continuity Issues, Glass-Tied. Then I created 3 drafts. One to the head of HR, with a short subject line, for internal ethics review. One to a group of 4 mid-tier glass-tied investors, all of whom were CC'd on a leaked funding report Amber had once printed at home. And one to a journalist from the Boston Ledger, a woman named Renaya Chun, who had written a long-form piece on corporate abuse cycles a year ago. Her email was hard to find. I dug it out from a defunct portfolio site she hadn't updated in years. Each message was concise. No accusations, no threats, no demands, just the facts. A line from my email to HR read, "The materials attached raise questions about Glass-Tied's internal leadership, use of resources, and potential systemic ethical concerns. I believe it deserves review. I am not seeking anything in return. I just think you should know." I hit send just after midnight. Then I deleted the folder from my desktop, removed every trace, cleared the drive, left only one copy, offline, on a flash drive, sealed in an envelope in a drawer marked insurance. Then I waited. I expected nothing to happen. But I was wrong. The first ripple hit less than 24 hours later. I saw it on LinkedIn. A lead designer at Glass-Tied posted a vague but telling update. Sometimes silence does more damage than speaking out. If you've ever questioned your gut, trust it. The post didn't tag anyone, but the comments filled fast. Subtweets followed. And then came the anonymous leaks. A **T of a resignation letter citing hostile executive behavior. A photo of a whiteboard from a team meeting with a joke scribbled across the top. "Don't sleep your way to the top, unless you're into glass ceilings." That one spread like wildfire. Then came the funding freeze. One of the smaller VC funds listed on Glass-Tied's public partnerships page posted a single line on their site. "Our investment in Glass-Tied is paused pending internal clarity." Clarity, a perfect corporate synonym for something smells, and we're backing away until it stops. Within days, everything started to slide. I watched from the outside, quiet, still. I didn't comment. I didn't reply to messages. I didn't even tell Kate. I figured she'd find out soon enough. Internal forums lit up with activity. Whisper networks turned into statement threads. Someone released a Medium post titled, "Inside the Culture of Optics," signed only with the initials L.S. But the details were sharp, specific. Names blurred, but the stories matched the dates in Kate's notebook. Even the Boston Ledger chimed in. Renaya Chun published a short, developing blurb under the tech section. No names, just allegations of ethical misconduct have surfaced at a mid-sized Seattle tech firm. Multiple sources cite abuse of power, favoritism, and patterns of retaliatory offboarding. We are currently investigating. I didn't smile when I read it, but I did breathe. Not out of satisfaction, but relief. Someone else saw it now. It wasn't just in my head. It wasn't just in Kate's notebook or whispered in parking lots. It was real, documented, spoken aloud. Amber didn't say a word for the first few days. Then, finally, a message. "We need to talk." I didn't respond. An hour later, another. "You shouldn't have done this." There it was. Not "I'm sorry." Not "I understand." Just a warning. A guilt-flavored bullet with my name scratched into the casing. It was never about remorse for her. It was about damage control. But I wasn't part of her damage anymore. I wasn't hers, period. The fallout wasn't mine to handle. I didn't know her clarity. I didn't know her rescue. She had made her decisions in silence. I had responded in kind. No arguments. No revenge speech. No theatrics. Just a quiet flood that started with a folder and ended with a crack spreading through everything they thought would hold. And the best part? No one ever knew who started it. Trevor vanished. No farewell, no statement. His name was erased, emails, meetings, bios. Gone like he'd never existed. Amber texted twice. "We need to talk." Then, "You shouldn't have done this." But I stayed silent. I knew it wasn't guilt she felt. It was fear. Not of losing me. She had already lost me. But of losing the image she built. I wasn't her husband anymore. I was the silence echoing through the wreckage. A week later, she left. No goodbyes, no fight, just a note on the kitchen table. "You were always reliable, but I needed more. Visibility, ambition, victory. Sorry I chose myself." I didn't burn it. I photographed it, filed it under closed, and tossed the paper. That night, I deleted every shared file, every trace. The next morning, I ran without music or messages. Just my feet and the street, where my life was already moving forward, without her.